Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show, we're talking about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the series premiere of The Power. Great series premiere. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, first and foremost, I went into this kind of knowing it was going to be kind of an ensemble cast, but it is interesting because it feels like they're setting up Allie maybe to be like the head of what's about to come and what's happening to the world. It seems like she might be kind of like the new like a revolutionary like leader in this, maybe because her circumstance is so different from the others. I mean, they're all generating powers, but it's specifically the fact is Allie's the only one who's generated powers who hears a voice in her head. Like, so the fact is that I don't know if it's someone else who, well, because I'm curious what that is. Is that just like a manifestation of like her subconscious doing that? Or is it just like, no, like this, maybe there's someone else who got their powers like long before them and is, starting a revolution and looks at Allie as to be kind of like their liaison or their avatar, which to make these changes in the world through. I don't know, but it definitely feels like Allie's set up to be like on a different path, on the same path, but on a different angle than everyone else. But we'll kind of break the stories down person by person. First and foremost, let's start off with Allie. We get introduced to her adopted situation, like her adopted parent, what is it, the Montgomerys? And it's like, oh, she doesn't talk. And it's like, yeah, that's usually a byproduct of something traumatic. Now, I'm curious, like, because at first I was like, wait, was she not talking before they got to her? Because I was thinking like, okay, they're adopting her, but maybe I didn't pay as much of attention to some of that wording. But I thought it was interesting too, the moment her family's taking her to church and everything. And then there's also like, the sin of my great grandma Eve. And then the voice start telling her like, oh yeah, putting it on the woman. Yeah, like this all started because of the sins of a woman. And she started hearing the voice, and the voice is like, right, you can feel it, can't you? She hadn't really generated the powers yet, whereas the others, it seemed like little by little we saw them generating the powers. At least in Allie's case, she didn't even spark the power yet, but she felt it. So we find, I figured something was creepy when her like foster dad or whatever like wiped the ice cream up off her. I was like, why would you do that? And I was like, that seemed creepy. And and he was like, oh, space cadet. And she smiled, but that smile quickly disappeared. I was like, okay. So I was like, is some like sinister stuff happening here? Oh yeah, it turns out that's the case. And my biggest question was, okay, so if the father's doing something, does the mother know? It turns out she did. She knew and was just kind of trying to be completely oblivious to it. Because we did hear that, like, they've never had any children of their own, but they have fostered other kids. Now, that I think is kind of interesting. I'm like, okay, like, you're latching on to Allie so much, even though you fostered other kids. Like, hey, they're grown, they're out of the house. That's one thing. But the way you made it sound almost like they were just constant rotation. I guess, like, the kids either ran away or never said anything. And they just, like, maybe after the father does what he does, kind of, like, sadly abusing these girls, like they end up like returning to the foster system, and he just like cycles in a new girl. And I that's why I'm like, I don't know whether the wife is just like, I'm afraid of suffering his abuse, and maybe she's had to deal with it for years, and now someone else is having to take it, and she's just, because it's like you're serving them like these young women up to him, and it seems like, and when he does his thing, you're blasting the music so you don't hear it. So that's why I'm like, it makes me wonder, like, were you in their same shoes? Like, when you were younger, did he do the same thing to you? Or is it because, like, you love him and you don't condone it, but it's like, yeah, this is just a part of I mean, especially coming from a religious person, because now it makes that scene when he was about to go get her in church and her being like, I don't know, you stay. Now it's like, I don't want you trying to do anything to her while, like, there are potential witnesses around. I think that's what it is. So, and it benefited them that she didn't talk. But then all of a sudden she found her voice. She's like, you're not my dad. You're not my mom. I don't like meat. I don't like take like pride in like killing something. And when he tried to attack her, she super murdered him. That was pretty hardcore, like like how, I mean, obviously electricity can't like obviously leave you with that lightning scar of like how it, because it burns your flesh and everything. So like his mouth and his face, you can see like the lightning marks like from the electricity like burn his face, his retina and everything. It's like, jeez. Understandably, he 100% deserves it. And I'm curious, the fact that she didn't even go after the wife makes me wonder, like, right, she's not worth it. Like, I killed the monster that's been abusing me, so that's all it takes. Or maybe that's kind of like her penance of like, yeah, your husband's dead, and yeah, you know what he did, so what are you going to do? Are you going to call the cops? Are you going to admit what your husband's been doing and why this child might be motivated to kill? Like, that's what I'm curious. And then also, like, how do you explain, like, him being electrocuted, like, if she does call the cops? So that's the interesting thing. And obviously the big thing too, before we go into the other stories, is wondering how because it seems like for everyone, it's just coming out of nowhere. There was one character, like we'll talk about later on in Joss's side of things, where she met Kat, and Kat's like, yeah, this has been happening to me for like 2 weeks. And then Joss is like, oh, it just started happening to me today. So the question then becomes, where is this coming from? Why is this coming out of nowhere? So I'm wondering, are we kind of dealing with more so like a X-Men thing, kind of just an evolutionary mutation type of situation, especially because they're equating the power to that of an eel. I've never known the ins and outs of how an eel works, but apparently like it's kind of like has something to do with like their three of their organs or something like that. But they also use it to kind of control the nervous system of fish, and that's how they like control them into swimming into their mouth. I'm like, that's interesting. And once again, it's like Mother Nature is wild with how things in existence like operate. Like, it's like when you think about it's just one of those things where you're just like, the fact is evolutionarily they were created to do that. Like an evolutionary thing happened that made us like, oh, this is how we as eels eat. We control the nervous system of our food. I mean, it's just like a Venus flytrap. It's like, dude, that's nuts to think there's like a plant. It's like, okay, I got you. Like, the fact is that's wild, dude. So that's what I'm curious about. And I thought that was so beautifully shot, too, where, like, at the end, Allie's up against the glass at that marina or whatever, and she's touching the glass, and her electricity is drawing in the eels. Because they're not solitary creatures. They're pack creatures, which I would have never known them to be that. So, and I think it's obviously very, like, befitting for the giant metaphor that is the girls and women that will join together in this upcoming change to the world. So, that's interesting. We also have Roxy's situation. I was wondering about that, especially with her mom being so like, oh, don't ask your dad about work. I was kind of getting that film. I was like, is he, especially when he punched the cake and stuff like that, he's like, oh, what am I, an Irishman? Which I'm like, isn't the actor who plays him Irish? I was like, maybe that was supposed to be almost like a weird inside joke or something. He's English. The actor's name is Eddie Marsan, because I know him as Terry from Ray Donovan. In that he did an American accent, but I was like, I knew I heard him in something. I don't know if he was doing an Irish accent and something else, because I'm wondering, am I confusing it with Paula Malcolmson? I'm probably butchering her last name. She played Abby in Ray Donovan. Like, I heard her in something else, kind of having like a British accent or something. She's Northern Irish, so I was like, okay, so maybe that's what I'm conflating, because I know I knew she wasn't American when I ended up finding it, because I saw her doing like kind of a British accent and something else. But maybe that's what I was conflating. Like, he's English and she's Northern Irish, and maybe I was like flipping that in my head of like, maybe that's where I got the whole like Northern Irish thing from, or not, unless he was doing an Irish accent or something. I just don't remember. Either way, Roxy wants to work for her dad, but her dad's like not. The fact is, especially when her mom specifically said a line of, your dad doesn't see you that way. Now, I interpreted that as like your dad doesn't see you as like the hardworking type. He sees you as kind of the lazy about like party person or something. I thought that might have been what it's implying, but we find out later on, her dad's a gangster. He has 3 other sons. He has, I don't know, like, cause I think Ricky's the half brother. Well, no, because I think they're all her half siblings, because they all have they all have the same mom. She has a different mom because while one of them was being, because I think it's like maybe like her and Daryl are the same age, I believe, and it's like, yeah, that's because he was having an affair with my mom while his wife was pregnant with Daryl or whatever. Either way, which is just funny because in Ray Donovan, obviously he has a half brother named Daryl. It's I don't know. I'm reading too much into it, but I was like, I just thought about that. I was like, oh, that's kind of interesting. Either way, he doesn't want her to have that side of the family, but she wants to be a part of it because she's such an outsider to the family. His wife isn't too receptive of her because it's like, right, you're not part of the family. Always wanted to make her feel like less than the family because it's like, hey, I'm literally at a table way in the back near the toilets. The fact of the matter is, my father had the audacity to give a speech talking about bringing a daughter into the family. You have me, you jackass. Like that is super disrespectful and super jacked up. That is like, right, you already have his wife not wanting to acknowledge you. Now your own father doesn't like he wants you to be like his kept secret. It seems like he has a decent enough relationship with Roxy because they seem like personality wise they can click, but it's just kind of like, right, you're just not made out for this. I mean, because I guess it's also that thing of like, yeah, you've got 3 other brothers, this is their lane of things. Him even saying like, your brother, he can stay calm, you get emotional, and you're like, for one, I'm like, I don't think you should ever just be like, oh, women are like, kind of put that on your daughter of like, oh, you're emotional. The last thing you need to do is, kind of try and like fit a woman into a hole, being like, yeah, like, oh, almost trying to. And he's probably specifically referencing his daughter, but it's like that's just kind of, you should never do that, because I mean, which I think is ironic considering I think you punching a cake because it's the wrong color doesn't show the most like calm, cool, and collected human being. You seemed a little emotional, like you got let your anger get the best of you, But maybe he's just kind of like, hey, that's not me getting emotional. I that's why I'm like, you're a hypocrite. But maybe he's saying all that just because he legitimately, hey, Roxy, you're my baby girl. I don't want you mixed up in this. But the fact is, it feels like you're not even acknowledging her existence, kind of pushing her to the wayside. So yeah, like she's understandable why she'd feel the way she does. And the sad thing, I would never expected that story to turn the way it did when people broke into the house and ultimately kill her mom. I thought like, okay, she's going to kill one of the guys. She killed one of the guys, or at the very least, he looked pretty dead. So I thought maybe she just like shut down his nervous system for a bit. I don't know. But the other guy knocked her out. And when she woke up, her mom's throat was, I was like, Jesus. I thought maybe she'd end up killing both of them. But it's like, no, her mom's dead. I was like, oh. Now, the fact is, they kept saying she's not supposed to be here. Now, 2 things pop into my mind. One, either it's implying like there's a possibility her dad might have had something to do with that, because once again, she was supposed to be at the wedding. Whoever set that up knew she was going to be at the wedding, but she came home early. Her dad was like, all right, we'll talk about this job stuff, just don't go anywhere. But she did, after like she was drinking some wine or champagne or whatever, some alcohol, and it just like the bottle zapped and like fell and started catching on fire with some surrounding stuff. She left early just because she was so pissed about the situation with her dad. So now they're like, okay, so there's a possibility her dad killed, but it's like, why? Is it because was she asking for stuff? Because Roxy's mom said she had just went out for like drinks with him like a week ago or something like that. So part of me wonders, was she pushing for something? Because she's the one that was telling Roxy to take the spa job that her dad was offering. It's like, yeah. So I'm like, and the other side of this could be her wicked stepmother. Like maybe that's what that was about. Maybe she called for the hit or whatever. Who knows? Because one of her brothers was kind of like, I mean, it could just be like, yo, look at Roxy. She's in a pretty bad state. Because one of the brothers who's kind of, I think it's Daryl, who's supposed to be like the one that's kind of like soft, never gets his hands dirty. I don't know if that's who that was, but one of them was kind of freaking out. Now part of me wonders, like, were they more in the know about this? Were all of them in the know about it? So that's going to be interesting. Once again, those are my early theories about that. It feels like that's an inside family job. Like, someone in that family orchestrated, whether it's the dad and everyone knew about it, or the mom did it and maybe some of the sons knew about it, or all of them did and not their dad. We'll ultimately have to wait to see, but that's hard. I mean, she left the crime scene. She's there. She's like banged up because like one of the guys like hit her head against like something, so her head is gashed open and that's why she's bleeding. So there's that side of things. We have the Joss storyline where we meet Joss, and she's like liking. I think it's like hey, here's this guy I like, and it's probably the same guy she was at the locker with, who was like, hey, you okay? And she's like, oh, you ever feel like you're not like you feel like off even in your own skin? He was like, yeah, like all the time. I think that must have been the skating video she was watching earlier, was that dude's. And she liked it, but then she was like, no, and unliked it. And then she saw these comments shitting on I guess she's either she is the mayor or she's running for mayor. Margot. I don't know if it's Margaret or because it was like Margot. So I don't. I'm assuming the T's silent, like Margot Robbie. Played by Toni Collette. But I was like, she left a comment and being like, oh yeah, $800, blah, 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 calling her a bitch and everything. And then she gets a whole bunch of likes. And I was like, that's your mom, isn't it? I was like, it has to be. Like, the fact is you're super excited about them tearing her apart, calling her a liar, her a witch and all that. And we can hear it's like, yeah, it's definitely her mom. But the question is, what's her beef with her mom? Does she just not agree with her mom, or is it teenage angst, or is it a combination of the two? But yeah, she's slowly discovering her powers. I even think it's interesting that it's starting to manifest as I keep referencing like the lightning scar, because if you're not aware, and once again, it's a jacked up thing, but typically I don't know if it doesn't happen all the time, but if you survive a lightning strike, being struck by lightning gives you, as people might refer to it as, like a natural tattoo, because it's a very, like, there's a specific striation that is created on your body, like a marked striation on your body that's a byproduct of being struck by lightning. So she kind of has a little bit of a scar there building up, like almost like because the electricity. And I'm like, I don't know if anyone else has developed that to that degree, that at least that we're aware of, because at least Kat, like, immediately she's like, oh, I know what's going on. She's like, she saw, like, I think her, like, her fiddling with the scars. She might have even been there when, like, the Joss touched the lockers and ended up electrocuting everybody. But yeah, Kat showcases, like, hey, like, kind of teaching her how to kind of control this. So I don't know if they're, like, the only ones, because even Joss was like, hey, where does this come from? But Kat's like, I don't know, and it doesn't matter. I mean, at the end of the day, it's ours, and they show off their power, and they start with like a street light, and it ends up like surging, and it seems like it knocks out the power in the relative area. So I'm like, and that's them probably not even going full force, but that's them together channeling it. That's just two we're able to knock out. I mean, to be fair, maybe that light pole it's probably jacked into like the city power grid. So when they like short circuited it, the excess energy probably like went across the grid and just like shut shit down. Like it probably overloaded a lot of stuff in the general area, you know. But yeah, so small introduction to the kind of Joss's circumstances. Once again, we definitely dived a lot deeper into Roxy and Allie's circumstances. I should also talk about, too, I like in it what this show seems like it's going to be doing, and it makes sense in the grand scheme of things. It kind of reminds me of Sense8 in that grand scale of how, well, I mean, for one, the discovery of, like, you know, this potential evolutionary thing, but also, if you never saw Sense8 on Netflix, I highly recommend. It might be kind of a slow burn for people, but I think it's a really great, phenomenal show, especially if you're looking for something like this, kind of in that same science fictional vein. But, that was on a very international level, because that show took place in, like, what was it, like 7 different countries. It feels like we're kind of getting that a little bit here, considering, like, okay, we have some stuff with Joss and Allie's story seem to be stateside, whereas Roxy's is in London specifically, and Tundi's story, which was kind of, I think, is interesting too. And I wonder, is that going to be his purpose in the story? The fact is that the main characters we've gotten introduced to so far are 3 ladies, kind of get 3 different spectrums. And, like, you know, especially because two of those characters went through some hardship. Once again, we don't know what Joss's thing is, but we haven't really been introduced to like her hardship. She most likely has them. We just haven't gotten introduced to them. But the fact is that one of the other characters would be Tundi, and I think maybe that's supposed to be the juxtaposition of the ladies like being like the main cat. The most of this cast is going to mainly be women, and so having a male character kind of be at the forefront of like seeing this firsthand, especially considering. I don't know if he's like a full-blown journalist or he's kind of like in that, oh, I'm trying to be a journalist and want to be a journalist, but it doesn't seem like that's what his dad wants him to be. His dad wants him to kind of have like the more traditional 9-to-5 job. But he's hanging with his friend, and I hope I'm not butchering her name, because I think it's pronounced Nuidi. No, what is it? It was like... Nudie, maybe I'm butchering it, but she's a journalist and she's looking into like, hey, some juju stories she had heard. I was like, oh, okay, so their correlation, the juju and magic, and I was like, okay, so she's gonna be investigating the power stuff, but. She asked Tundi to help her. Like, I guess it's like, right, I'm a journalist, but you have a large enough following on social media. I was hoping that you could help, like, kind of spread this, but he was too busy with someone else. I'm going to butcher her name too. Adunola, who even references, like, oh, Nuidi still likes you, and he's like, no, it was like a one-time thing, and she's like, really? And it's like, I guess it's like they're best friends that hooked up at least one time, and it definitely seemed like she was kind of feeling kind of miffed when she saw like, oh, Tundi, I see what it is. You're getting home because you got a guest, because he was texting with someone being like, yo, I'm here waiting for you. So, but Tundi and I do know that we're doing their thing, and she accidentally electrocutes him. So I don't know if she already knew about her powers, and that's why she bounced, because she's like, oh, crap. Like, maybe it's been surfacing a little bit, but in that moment, she was like, oh, crap, I didn't control that. It slipped out, and Tundi was looking into it. I love that one of the videos, he was looking up, and this guy was like, oh, what was it? It was a video or something about sticking an electrode up your butt. I was like, what the fuck is that video? I think that was one of the search results with him looking it up, like, oh, like controlling electricity and butt zaps or something like that. But he tried to find out where Nuidi was doing her story, and he ultimately found in a house of women who are all displaying their powers, because they're like, to the point that obviously they can start a fire, because even Kat had talked about it. I mean, electricity can generate heat. I mean, we've seen that at least twice in this episode, where Roxy accidentally started a fire with her powers, and one of the women Tundi came across was lighting a cigarette. But the whole situation kind of escalated when they saw him come in there, and I don't know if it's a situation where it's like, because I don't know specifically what like country and Africa that might be, so I don't know if it's like because the fact is, it's like, oh, there's a guy here, and maybe they just haven't had the best experience with guy. I mean, they might have had, for all we know, they could be having had experiences kind of like Allie, just like, not just like in a father figure type of way, but more like a husband or significant other type of way. And so seeing a guy there, especially one that was documenting everything, and sadly, Nuidi ended up getting hurt. I know I'm butchering her name. I'm so sorry. Because it's like Nadudi, like it's something like that. It's like that, but I'm butchering it every time I say it. I do apologize, but she ended up getting the electricity hit her face, and I think it wasn't a full direct hit, but it was enough, I think, to send her nervous system into shock, and so she kind of started convulsing, so everyone afterwards scattered, so that sucks, because she was just trying to defend her friend. I actually thought he was going to run into Andunola like there, but she probably doesn't know about all this, or maybe she does, we don't know, but it's definitely going to be interesting to see where things kind of go from here. I did like that kind of cold opening where they have like showed you kind of like very like quick cuts of like everything you're going to probably see over the course of this season, but just kind of so much stuff out of context about what's about to happen. And I'm assuming that last shot was Margot, Joss's mom, getting arrested potentially. There look like some police like behind her. So what that all entails, we'll get the full context as everything continues. Obviously, I'm very excited to jump into episodes 2 and 3 to see where all of this ends up taking us. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about. So the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.